What is up, ladies and gentlemen, to Be Great podcast? I think this is episode 26. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Some of it I don't want to talk about, but I'm forced to. So here we go. Let's get right into it so I can be done with the nightmare that happened on Saturday. So let's go over the game picks that I did. I did fine, 6-4. It is what it is. We'll go over everything and game by game. I'll save Georgia Ole Miss for last because I have a lot to say. But let's start with Florida, Texas. I picked Texas, told you they'd handle Florida, and that's exactly what happened. It doesn't tell me much about Texas. It doesn't tell me much about Florida. I said everything I needed to say about Florida last week. The fact that they're keeping Billy Napier tells me they're not a serious football program anymore. They're not going to make a bowl game for the second year in a row now. That is an embarrassment for the University of Florida. And to run it back with him next year is a sham, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Next, Miami, Georgia Tech. I told you eventually Miami would slip. I didn't predict it this week because I thought, because a logical person would think that when you lost to Georgia Tech last year in the way that you did, you'd be way more prepared and really want to beat them going into the game this year. And nope, they just lost again to Georgia Tech. Apparently, Georgia Tech is to Miami what Alabama is to Georgia. But you know what? I'm not complaining. Miami's fraudulent. I'm just happy everyone saw it now, finally. And look, that offense can score, but when you stop them a few times and they don't score as many points, you're not going to win because your defense blows. Indiana beat Michigan a lot closer than I thought it was going to be, which I thought that there was a chance that that could happen, but I thought Indiana was just simply too talented and Michigan was too trash. And I think Michigan still is trash, but Indiana made sure that they got the win, and they're just chugging along, still undefeated. It's very impressive, and they are just zooming their way to a playoff berth. Let's see. Colorado beat Texas Tech. I picked Texas Tech, and the pick looked good at halftime. And then all of a sudden it didn't because Texas Tech decided that they forgot how to play football. But that's okay. Coach Prime in Colorado, they're doing good this season. There's a chance they represent the Big 12 in the playoff. And look, at the end of the day, if they get into the playoff, it's good for Colorado no matter even if they get into the playoff and then just get absolutely dumpstered on in the playoff in whatever game they play. Even if that's the case, no one's going to discredit well, there will be people who try to, the real haters, but you can't discredit what Dion's done. He's done a lot better job this season, and he's proved a lot of the doubters wrong. So that's good for him and good for Shadur and Travis. I do worry about them for next year, though. Anyways, South Carolina beat Vanderbilt. I kind of saw that one coming. Vanderbilt's a good team, but they have a ceiling. That's the reality. And you still have to understand that if you're a Vanderbilt fan or if you believe what I believe, and that is that Vanderbilt is America's team. And they still are. But South Carolina is just a lot better than people thought this year. They're a solid football team. And Vanderbilt just doesn't have the horses still to beat that. Oh man, Alabama LSU, what a disappointment. My mom is an LSU fan. She was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so I really wanted LSU to win last night. Or not last night. This is Tuesday. I really wanted them to win on Saturday night. And man, they just got a bomb dropped on them at home. And I think it's an indictment on Garrett Nussmeier. I think it's mostly, though, an indictment on Brian Kelly. What I do not understand is Brian Kelly continues to tell us he continues to be very critical of his team. He continues to be very critical and say that, oh, this team, they keep making the same mistakes. I'm so angry. I'm so frustrated. Well, guess what, Brian? That's on you. You're their head coach. You're supposed to be the one that makes sure these things don't happen. I understand you're not on the field. You're not playing, you're not throwing the pass, you're not catching, you're not playing defense and tackling. I understand that. But why is it that LSU looked so unprepared against Alabama in a game that it was for your season? It was for your season. It was for your playoff chances. You're not making the playoff. You're not. You have 3 losses. I think that eliminates you. It would be different if you had 3 losses and they were all to really good teams, but you don't. You have a lot. First of all, you got blown out by Alabama at home, by the way. You got blown out by Texas A&M. That's another problem. 2 of your losses, you got blown out. And in the beginning of the season, you lost to a USC team who's trash. You're not making the playoff. You're eliminated. And in an elimination game, you looked completely unprepared to play at home in that environment. And that, to me, is an indictment on the head coach, and it's an absolute embarrassment and absolute tragedy. I don't get it. I don't understand. You let Jalen Milroe do literally whatever he wanted to do. That's unacceptable. You looked worse than Georgia did every time we play Alabama. And that's hard to do. Missouri beat Oklahoma in a mid-off. Both these teams have been disappointing this season, and it was just kind of who's the better disappointing team. Turns out it's Missouri. Good for them, I guess. Penn State beat the brakes off Washington. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. James Franklin can't win the big game. But I'll tell you this. He wins the games against he wins like the upset alert game. You know what I'm saying? Like whenever Penn State is shown like, oh, Penn State, they could lose this game, he always wins those pretty handedly. Like West Virginia, first game of the season, I knew Penn State was winning that. Washington, I knew Penn State was winning. It's just they become inept when they play a really good team, which is unfortunate. BYU escaped at Utah. BYU continues to escape. They give me Miami vibes. Eventually, they're going to get caught. And they're not as good as Miami. So when they get caught, they're going to get caught, and they're just bobbing and weaving right now. And good for them. They're in a really good position. No one expected BYU to be where they are at the beginning of the season. I certainly didn't, and I thought they'd be towards the bottom of the Big 12, and they're in first. So it's good for BYU, good for the Storm and Mormons, and you gotta see how long it lasts. But let's get to what I really want to talk about, and that's Georgia Ole Miss. Look, I've been a Georgia fan all my life, right? I grew up in the streets of Mark Richt and Joe Cox, Matthew Stafford, no Sean Marino, Muhammad Massaquoi, Bakari Rambo, Brandon Boykin. Let's see, how many more can I remember? Todd Gurley. There we go. There's a name. Aaron Murray and those guys. And look, last night, I don't know why I keep saying last night. Probably because it's been living in my nightmares. Saturday night was one of the worst performances. Actually, it's probably the worst performance I've seen out of a Kirby Smart team since when? For a few years, that's for sure. Maybe since 2020. And I mean, look, there's a lot of things that went wrong. A lot of people want to blame Carson Beck, and I understand people's problem and issue and anger with Carson Beck. He looks a shell of his former self. This is true. However, I don't blame the Ole Miss loss on Carson. I actually think he played fine. The problem for me was that number one, Carson had no time to throw the football. 0. Ole Miss's defensive line made Georgia's offensive line look like a bunch of JV high schoolers. It is hard to play quarterback when the defensive line is on you by the time you end your three-step drop. It's kind of hard to play quarterback that way. The receivers, if I see another Georgia player drop a pass, I might have to drive to Athens myself and lace up because I'm sick of it. I know the gloves that these college kids get. I got handed some by a guy by one of the staff members of UGA. He handed me a pair of their gloves. I know how good they are. So the fact that you are out here dropping passes when they're hitting you in the chest, Benjamin Urasek, number 84, is an absolute travesty. I'm so angry with him, I can't even speak. Bum. Bum. If it hits you in the hands, you catch the ball. And the fact that we are this far into the season and they continue to drop pass after pass is beyond me. London Humphreys, you're having a little bit of a drop problem too. Get it together. Get it together. And if you can't get it together, put someone else in. I don't care who it is. It could be, I don't even know. Put Kirby in at wide receiver for all I care. I'm sick of the drops. Sick of it. But I'll tell you what, that's not even what made me the most mad. That is not even what made me the most mad. What made me the most mad was the defense. I have warned this season. I have warned all season because I saw it in the Alabama game. This Georgia secondary is not elite. It's not even great. I would hardly say it's good. The Georgia secondary is mid, and that's a huge problem. Because if you can't consistently get pressure, these bums are going to get burnt. If Dalen Everett is your best corner, you're in trouble. Julian Humphreys has been burnt all season, burnt toast. If I see him allow inside leverage on a slant one more time, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose it. He can't cover a slant. You know what? None of the Georgia secondary can cover a slant. Janelle Aguero, who's been playing good, he's been better as the season gone on, had his worst game against Ole Miss, consistently busted coverages, which tells me that the players aren't paying attention. Malachi, I think, has been disappointing this season, other than the Clemson game. Constantly has his eyes in the backfield for whatever the reason and not doing their job. The linebackers have been fine. The defensive line was tremendous against Texas. They go up against Ole Miss, and it's almost like, other than the first possession, it's almost like they were not there. Jackson Dart was hobbled on one leg and was running for 20 yards. You couldn't cover their receivers if your life depended on it. It's an embarrassment. And I knew they were in trouble when Jackson Dart gets injured and the backup comes in and just shreds you all the way down the field, dink and dunk for a touchdown. I knew they were in trouble because I know my team. Now look, that's all the negative. Oh, by the way, couldn't run the ball either. That's a little bit of a problem. Little bit of a problem. But let me get, and also the receivers can't get separation. They can't catch, and when they can't get separation, and when they can get separation, they drop it. Anywho, let me get to the positive. And yes, there is a positive side. The reality is that Georgia has not played in Sanford in a month. Because the last time they played in Sanford was against Mississippi State. That was mid-October. We're now on November 12th. They're about to have another home game against Tennessee, and I'll have my pick for that game on Friday. I have a feeling I know how that game's going to go. But the thing, and I saw this stat on Twitter, Georgia has played more ranked opponents away or on neutral site, on the road or on neutral site, than they have played home games total. Because they've played 4 on the road, neutral site, ranked games: Clemson, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas. And they've only played 3 total home games. One against, oh my gosh, was it Tennessee Tech or something like that? The Cupcake. Another one was Auburn, and then another one was Mississippi State. This team now gets 3, and here's what I'll say. This form of Georgia potentially, I have no faith in this, but potentially could be very dangerous, and I'll tell you why. You just had an embarrassing loss to a team not named Alabama for the first time since 2020. And finally, you're back at home after a month. And you get to end the season with 3 home games in a row: Tennessee, UMass, Georgia Tech. You won't play in the SEC championship unless something crazy happens. And if you win out, if you beat Tennessee, if you beat UMass, you beat Georgia Tech, you'll be in the playoff. As far as where exactly your ranking will be, we'll see. Which I have a little beef with the AP poll. Doesn't really matter these days. We'll see where the playoff rankings go tonight. But I have a little beef with the AP poll, which I'll get to after I'm done with this. Georgia just needs to hunker down and focus on them for these next 3 home games. Get through them, dominate, and then you get a week rest with the championship game because you won't be playing in it. And then ideally you get a home playoff game against whoever it ends up being. And you go from there. And I think there is potential. And I've come to a point where after a back-to-back national championship, it's hard for me to doubt Kirby Smart. And I'm not saying that means I expect Georgia to just win the national championship every year. That's not reality. That's not sports. That's not football. But I expect at least a way better performance in the playoff than I saw on Saturday night against Ole Miss. That's for sure. As far as Carson, I think that at this point his draft stock has plummeted. He can come back for another year. I think he will, but I don't think he'll be the quarterback for Georgia. I think we'll say, we appreciate your 2 years starting for us. We're going to go another direction. And I think he transfers. And I have a funny feeling he's going to transfer to Miami. Miami will be losing Cam Ward. And I think they might just go the same route, getting another senior quarterback on his last year in Carson Beck. And Carson's girlfriend plays basketball for Miami. Just putting that out there. Just putting that out there. Now, my beef with the AP poll. Here's my problem. Georgia was ranked, I think second in the AP poll before the Ole Miss game. And now they're ranked 11. So let me just try and understand this. So Georgia, after losing to a ranked Ole Miss team on the road, drops, 9 spots. But yet, when Alabama and Tennessee both lost, Alabama to an unranked Vanderbilt team and Tennessee to an unranked Arkansas team, they didn't even drop out of the top 7. But we dropped from 2 to 11. Alabama dropped, I think, 6 when they lost to Vanderbilt? Tennessee dropped a few rankings. I think they were, I forget what ranking Tennessee was, but they only dropped to like 7 or 8 or 6 or something like that. I think they actually might have dropped to 6. And they lost to an unranked Arkansas. We just lost to a ranked Ole Miss team on the road and you put us out of the top 10 when we were at 2. Can someone just explain that to me? I understand it was a bad performance against Ole Miss. Alabama let Vanderbilt score 40. Like, what am I missing? Now, I'm not going to get too angry about it until, we see the playoff rankings tonight. But if the playoff rankings are similar, like if we drop from, because we're currently 3 in the playoff rankings, if we drop from 3 to almost out of the playoff, like if we're 11, 12, 13, I'm probably going to have a problem with that. Like, I understand us dropping. That's fine. But let me look at the current college football playoff rankings. Give me 1 sec to search this up. College football playoff rank. I'll tell you how far I think we should drop. Let's see. Here it is. So we're currently at 3. Miami lost to an unranked Georgia Tech team. So in my opinion, a 7-2 Georgia should be ranked ahead of a 9-1 Miami. So Texas will jump us. Penn State will jump us. Tennessee will jump us. And then if you want Indiana and BYU to jump us, I guess they'll move Alabama up quite a bit because Alabama was at 11. So what I would assume is it's going to be Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Tennessee 5. I think they'll put Alabama 6, maybe. Indiana 7. BYU 8. And then I think it should be Georgia 9, Miami, Notre Dame 10, Miami 11, Boise State 12. That's what I think it should be. But I have a strange feeling we're going to go down to 11. I have a strange feeling, and I might have to rant about that on Friday if that's the case, because that's just stupid. Now, look, I give the playoff committee credit for putting Alabama down at 11. Even though then again, who knows what they would have put them after they lost to Vanderbilt. But I also understand that the AP rankings mean nothing nowadays, so it's hard to take them too much into consideration. But I just had to get that off my chest. But that is all I have to talk about today. I ranted about my Georgia Bulldogs because it needed to be said. And I hope everyone has a great day. We're coming up on another great weekend of college football. I'll have my picks on Friday. Be safe out there. Have a great day. Go Dogs.